is lesson number 4, which we are calling Relationship Island. Of course, everything's building on this nautical theme of taking a voyage, and really the reason you leave the cove of friendship is so that you can get to Relationship Island, and where there's a reef of restraint, and it's in a place, it can develop in a place of purity so that you can discern God's will for the next step of your life. So today is Relationship Island, and right there around Purity Bay. Proverbs chapter 31 is where we're going to begin. This is our main springboard text this morning. Proverbs 31 verse 10 says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." And you know what that means is that they're not easy to come by, right? Something that's precious, it means that it's rare, and it's really special when you find it. For the heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. Now drop down, we could read the whole chapter, but we're going to look at verse 30. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. She shall be praised. All right, we've talked a lot about all the boundaries, the warnings, the things like don't do this, beware of that. You know, it's been a lot of the negative side, if you will. The cautionary side of pursuing relationships. And that's important because, well, there's a lot of dangers out there, right? And it's important that we think about these things and not go into it blindly. But it's not all negative, right? There is something to do in a relationship. And so today we go more towards the positive side of this, and what is a relationship supposed to be about? For a basic definition of what we're talking about, that Christian dating is about, here's the things you're going to be doing. Communicating. Talk. Spending time together. That makes sense. Sharing experiences with this person that you are drawn to, attracted to, in order to determine whether they would make a good spouse or not. That's the end goal. Okay? We don't leave Friendship Cove to go live indefinitely on Relationship Island. All right? Relationship Island is a temporary stop on the way to determining whether marriage is the next step between these two people. All right, I want you to think of it like this. The relationship process, and here's where we'll get into our notes. The relationship process is the most important interview of your life. The most important interview of your life. How many of you have a job where you had to go apply and have an interview and all that stuff? All right? Yeah. You're familiar with that. So you go to the interview, and what do? You sit down and you talk, right? There's communication, and there's questions being asked of you. You maybe get a chance to ask some questions as well. And so there's communication. You're learning about one another. Make sure you get the right one. Some forgeries were floating around here earlier. So there you go. So when you go to an interview, you're asking questions. The employer is going to be like checking for references. Do you have any references? What's references? Anybody know what a reference is?
People who can speak to you.
Oh,
like speak to that person about you.
Right. Yeah. So they can maybe give a recommendation as to what kind of character you have, what kind of a worker that you will be, things like that. All right. So bring in your mind this idea that a relationship, preparing for marriage, is like an extended interview process. You are getting to know one another, you are asking questions, you are learning about this person, and you are, if you're wise, you're seeking references along the way of other people that are observing that person and you, and taking input to see if they'd be a good fit. So in the same way, when you agree to go out with someone, that begins a two-way evaluation of one another to see if this is somebody that you want to commit yourself to for the rest of your life. You go have an interview for a job, that's all great and good, and it's an important appointment, but you can quit a job. If you get into it a few weeks or months and you're like, oh man, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, I'm out of here. You can do that, right? You lose your paycheck at that point, but you can quit a job. When you enter into marriage, the Bible way, you can't just get out when you realize, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be. That's why you don't have just like one interview. Okay, it's an extended period of time of many different interviews together, and that's not to say that it's that it should be all business either. Obviously, there's part of the interview process is, do I actually enjoy being around this person, and can we have fun together as friends, right? Is this somebody that I want to be around for the rest of my life? And that's part of the evaluation. You're trying to determine whether this person is a good fit for you and vice versa. Are they a good fit? A couple of years ago, I went down to Oklahoma City, and I had already talked to the church about hiring somebody on staff to bring somebody to work with the youth and with the music and things like that. So we kind of had some basic boxes that we wanted checked there. This is who we're kind of looking for, but I didn't know who would fill the position, right? We needed a position. And so I contacted the Bible college down there, and I said, who have you got, who's in the area that might be a good fit for a position like this? And so I had a few names that were given to me. And so I set up a few interviews to sit down and talk with different candidates about the possibility of coming up here and coming on staff. And of course, the Hainlines, they were one of the couples that I got to interview while I was down there. And Brother Levi as well, interviewed him. And that worked out. But when I went down there, I was not sure. I was very new at this, right? Now, you might not think of me as young, but I'm actually a young pastor, all right? And I had never done this before. I had like a summer intern or somebody come alongside for a short period of time, and that's a very low committal thing. It's not a huge deal. And so, but we're talking about somebody that's going to come and they're going to stay, and I'm going to have to look at them every day, and we're going to have to know how we work together. And so I said, we're going to have to do something about this face. Grow a beard, something. Oh. Sarcasm, lovely, isn't it? And when I sat down and talked with these men for the interview process, I'm convinced the Lord had already given me sort of a framework to approach it with. And there was a book that I came across at just the right time. And isn't it amazing how God does that? How his timing is just perfect. And this book is called The Way of the Shepherd. And in The Way of the Shepherd, it's kind of using Psalm 23 in a business sense, sort of. And he talks about how that as you're developing your team, your flock, you need to know the shape of your sheep. And that shape, or what we're going to add a sixth one, these shapes, is an acronym for things that you need to be looking for in an interview process. And that worked well for adding staff to the church, but I think this is a great framework as well for you to think about as you pursue a relationship. So let's talk about the shapes that you need to be watching for in a good mate. First is spirituality. Spirituality. Is he or she saved and shows it? All right. Now, honestly, you should know that before you get into the relationship. Okay. You need to have a very good understanding of this person's spiritual position before you ever agree to getting into a serious relationship with them. Don't even take that step until you know their testimony, until you have watched them for a while. The next blank is faithful. Are they faithful? That's an observational thing that you ought to be paying attention to, even way back here in Friendship Cove. Before you guys become anything more than just friends, you ought to be watching the possible candidates that are in your life and say, okay, who's faithful and who's not? And what's faithful mean? Well, come on Wednesday nights, we're talking about that, right? Gather, grow, give, go. Those are some good measurements on faithfulness. Are they here? Are they serving? Are they giving? Are they growing? All of those things. Are they faithful? Are they maturing as you observe and evaluate the person? Are they on a track of growth spiritually? Now, nobody is going to be the whole package. Okay? Not even you. So you're not going to have it all figured out yet, and neither will your spouse. But are they growing? Are they faithful? And is there a desire and a track of growth in their lives? If you're waiting for the perfect, ideal spouse that checks every single box, you'll probably never get married. All right? Honestly, you won't. Is there a track record of growth? That's what you want to watch for, okay, in the spiritual realm. So watch for the spirituality. Also, their heart. Gauge their heart. What are they passionate about? Now, we just talked about the spiritual side of things, and they ought to have a heart for God, right? We just talked about that. But even beyond that, people have interests, hobbies. That's the next one. Interests. They have interests, hobbies, things that they are passionate about. What's something else besides God that you are passionate about? I'm waiting. Mechanics. Cool. Reading. Yeah, awesome. Art. Helping people. Basketball. Are you happy with how the championship turned out?
It was very unexpected.
Very unexpected. Okay. Yeah.
I was expecting an unexpected to win, I guess.
Yeah. And that's a good case in point, because if somebody is passionate about sports, that's going to come up in conversation. That's going to come up in activities that you pursue together. And if you are going all sports and this person wants nothing to do with sports, I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying, think about it, all right? Because you got to be with this person the rest of your life. So some of your interests had better align. If not on that, find something else that you can find commonality in. And you know what? Interests, they do kind of change and merge a little bit. The more time you spend with somebody, you become more interested in what they're passionate about. So some of this comes along the way, but others, it's already in. So are you passionate about any of the same things? And if you're saying, you know what, we're both just passionate about each other. Boo. Okay, I shouldn't say boo. That's a good thing. But it's not enough. Okay, that in of itself, we have nothing in common except our love. Good luck. It's not going to go well for you. You need to be friends. You need to have some things in common. What has their heart? Attitude. Gauge the attitude. I have a few little subpoints under this one because it's important. Somebody with a chronically bad attitude will drag you down. If they are regularly negative, depressed, angry, steer clear. Okay? Now, that's, I guess I should just stick to my notes here. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Be cautious of someone with extreme emotional swings. Extreme emotional swings. Now, here's what I wanted to say. Everybody's going to have some up days and some down days. Okay? So it's not like, oh, you're dating this person and all of a sudden they're kind of cranky one day. It's like, oh, we're done. You had a bad attitude, buddy. Okay? We're not talking about a day or even a short season of life, right? Sometimes you're going through a valley and you're going through a stressful time of life, and things are a little topsy-turvy. But I'm saying that's why the interview is a bit extended. This isn't just a week-long process where you figure out, yeah, there's my spouse. No, there's time that you involve because you're watching the ups and downs, and you're watching to see, okay, are these negative, downward tendencies kind of the constant in this person's life? Or are they stable most of the time and then they just have a bad day now and then? That's normal. Here's another really important one. Don't allow someone to become emotionally dependent upon you. And here's why it's tricky. Because we all want to be needed. You ever thought about that before? Mm-hmm. You want to be needed by somebody. But that can be a problem because you don't want to marry a project. Somebody that's like, oh, they're just like, you know, they need a psychiatrist, and you're like, I'll be that for you. You know, I'll be your helper, and I will help lift you up. And so whenever they're around you, they're a little bit better. And then when they're apart from you or whatever, then devastation occurs. That's somebody that's become dependent upon you. And you might enjoy that for a little while, that sense of being needed, but you don't want to marry somebody like that. You don't want to be attached to them for the rest of your life, like always kind of swimming and having an anchor pulling you down all the time. No, it needs to be you help each other. Sometimes you're lifting them up out of a bad day, and sometimes they're lifting you up out of a bad day. It ought to work both directions. It's not your responsibility to fill the emotional needs of your boyfriend or girlfriend. They need to be able to find their identity, who they are, and their joy in Christ. In Christ alone. He is the one that they need to be anchored to. If they cannot function emotionally without you, that's a problem. That's a big problem. And sometimes people will get to the point where they're like, if you ever left me, I couldn't go on living, you know, or even make more specific threats than that, to say I would have to take my life if I didn't have this relationship, or if you ever left me. Oh, get out, because that's toxic and it's manipulative. Okay, it's not healthy in any way. You say, well, what's going to happen to them if I break off the relationship? That's not your responsibility. Right. And whatever their stability or instability is not your fault either. Okay, if somebody's going to be a good spouse, a good life partner for you, they need to show that they are capable of being a stable, functioning adult on their own. That makes sense, doesn't it? They've got to be able to function on their own before they can be a good spouse. So, under attitude, seek to marry somebody with a positive attitude and outlook on life. And that's a spectrum, you know? Not everybody's going to be the same bubbly optimist as the next person. But overall, do they have a upbeat, joy, love for life? Okay, that's going to be important. Any questions on that? Is it clear? Makes sense? Okay. Do you know some people that are utterly unstable and cannot seem to muster up an ounce of joy on their own? Have you ever met those people? Yeah. Yeah. Are you that person? Thanks. That's for a different lesson. Personality. Talking about the shapes acronym. Personality. Now to me, this ought to be the fun part of a dating relationship. You're getting to know that person's personality. You're discovering what you like about them. What do you like about them? Is it they're really creative? Are they really detail oriented? Is it the person's just that work ethic and that persistence to keep on going? Is it the sense of humor, right? Is it just like, man, it's just like sparks whenever you talk, and it's the chemistry is good between your personalities, not just attraction, but your personalities click, and you just enjoy that time visiting with one another and fellowshipping? In what ways are your personalities similar? That's important. Just kind of like the interests, but are your personalities similar in some way? Or what ways are you different but complementary? That's good too. In fact, you don't want to marry somebody just like you. That's not helpful, and that's not what God designed it to be. He wants us to be, to a degree, complementary of one another. Here's something. Do you light up when they are in the room and truly enjoy spending time together? If you don't, why not? Why? Before you marry somebody, you better like them. I know it's funny, and it seems like it should be obvious, but I'm telling you, I've dealt with so many husbands and wives. They just don't even like each other, and it's not necessarily because of some specific thing where it just fractured. They just have nothing in common, and somehow the two of them got together. You better enjoy being with this person. It ought to be just the highlight of your week when you get to be around them. It's awesome. So, if you say, no, I mean, I kind of have some problems in that area. We don't really like each other. We don't really get along, okay? Why are you still continuing the relationship? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that people do this. I think that fear can enter into it sometimes. I think there's a lot of insecurity. Who am I if not with this person? Pride. Well, you've got a lot invested into this thing, right? And you don't want to let that go. There's lots of underlying motivations that can pressure a person to stay in a relationship or marry somebody that they don't really like, right? Another one might be, well, we've already gone too far emotionally or physically, and so we're invested in that way, and so now I'm like, apart from them, man, I'm just damaged goods. That's a bad reason to marry somebody. There's healing for that. There's grace for those mistakes, all right? Don't use those excuses to stay in a relationship that really you should not be in. So gauge personality. Experiences. Remember, this is about what we're learning about them. So learn is the next blank. This is where communication is key. You're there to learn as much as you can about his or her past experiences, family history, all that good stuff. Tell me all about you, and that's a good thing. Because every one of us is, in part, a product of our environment and the experiences that we have had up to this point. Now, we're not going to go so far to say that you're like this, you have no determining responses or responsibilities in your life. Of course, you're also a product of your choices and your responses. But there's a lot of stuff that you never chose about your family, about your schooling and upbringing and all of the rest of it. There's a ton of experiences in the back of your life that have made you who you are. And you need to get to know those experiences about each other. Learn about their spiritual journey, how they came to faith in Christ. Learn about their spiritual victories. Learn about their spiritual failures, the things that they've struggled with. And then ask about previous relationships. Say, oh, that's really personal. Yeah, you're trying to determine whether you're going to commit yourself to this person forever and ever and ever. And that means, and that's a very personal relationship, and it means that really no questions are off limits. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to ask the questions and get the answers that you need. And then strengths. Strengths. In any interview, You gotta find out if the candidate has the basic skills, or especially the character that they need that will make them a good fit for the job. All right? Now, as I thought about this, a lot of training, even in your job where you work now, okay, your boss wasn't looking for, okay, you've got experience in all of these things and you can do exactly what I need you to do on day one, right? You get training on the job too. Meaning this, once you get married, you're gonna learn how to be a better husband or wife, practically speaking. If it's like, oh, she can only cook mac and cheese, it doesn't necessarily disqualify her as a good future wife. She's probably gonna learn by necessity, you know, as you go. Or, guy, get good on the grill, you know. I mean, make it work somehow. So those practical things, you're gonna learn some of that on the job, but watch the character, all right? Those are the kind of strengths I want to encourage you to watch for. Do they have the capacity to learn how to fit that role? So, when young ladies, when the day comes and you are evaluating a prospective husband, ask yourself some questions. Okay, I think a good question, my wife actually mentioned this one to me. How does he treat other people? Because he's gonna treat you well. He likes you and wants to marry you, you know, all of that. How does he treat other people? How does he treat his family? His mom, his siblings? Do other people think he's a jerk? Well, I never saw him be a jerk. Yeah, he's never been a jerk to you, right? He's trying to win you. How does he treat other people? Will he provide? Will he provide for a family? Meaning, you're watching him. Is he a hard worker? Is he afraid of work? Does he have a work ethic? Is he responsible with his money, or is he just blow it every chance he gets? That's dangerous, right? That's going to be tough on him to provide. Does he have leadership potential? Leadership potential, because if he's going to be a biblical husband and father, he's got to be able to be a leader. And you say, well, what does that look like? Well, does he take initiative on important things? Right? Is he stubborn in a good way? Is he more stubborn than you when it matters? There are some stubborn women. Did you know that, guys? They're out there. And that can work if the guy is willing to be more stubborn when it matters. Okay, a strong woman is fine, but she needs a strong man. If a strong woman marries a weak man, who's just like, go with the flow, whatever you think, honey, guess who's gonna lead? So stubbornness isn't always a terrible quality. You need to, now if he's stubborn about every little thing, that's not what I'm talking about, right? He's gonna put his foot down on everything. That's dumb. But when it counts, when it's right and wrong, when it's like, no, we're gonna do this. Okay, that's leadership potential. Can he protect you? Do you feel safe? Do you feel safe around him? And that's not just talking about threats from the outside. Like, yeah, if some bad dude shows up, he's gonna, he's strong and he's gonna defend me. And that's not the only thing I'm talking about. Do you feel safe around him? I'm saying, is he protecting your purity now? He should be guarding you now, even from himself, from the two of you and your fleshly lusts. Is he a protector now? That's big. How about a prospective wife? Guys, what should you be looking for? Well, she also ought to be a hard worker. Some girls are just kind of immature for a long time, and hey, that goes both ways. A lot of guys are immature too. But I mean that in this way, that they just kind of live in a fantasy world. And it's like, no, they need practical get your hands dirty, kind of, I know how to work hard. You go through Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman, the character trait that keeps ringing out is not she dresses well. Okay, it's not what's all. No, she's a hard worker. She is industrious with her hands, and she is helping to provide for her family and all of these things. So it's her work ethic. Her work ethic. Watch for that, guys. And that's interesting because it carries over for both the prospective man and the prospective woman. You know why that is? Life and marriage takes what? Work. Lots of work. It's not just going to float on the wings of your love. Okay? You're going to need a lot more than dew, Universe juice, as Kung Fu Panda would say. You need more than that, Oh, I lost you now, didn't I? All right. Good stuff. You need to you need to be willing to work. All right. Whew. How's she with kids? Does she hate kids? Is it like, you, kids? Now, there is a difference between someone else's kids and your kids. There is a difference. But I think it's a good thing when a girl kind of likes kids, right? And they're good with them. So, would she make a good mom someday, as much as you can tell? Does it seem she will be a submissive wife? And we already kind of talked about that stubbornness. If she's overly stubborn, or she has a bad attitude every time she doesn't get her way, that's a bad sign. Is she high maintenance emotionally and the rest of it? This stuff to watch for. Watch for strengths and weaknesses. Okay, we finished the SHAPES acronym. Good. Here's a question. How long should we stay on Relationship Island? And the most accurate answer I could come up with is it depends. And that's probably pretty obvious because there's so many different factors, If you're in school, that's going to change things. If a health crisis comes up, or you're long distance, or you're saving money, or your parents have said, we want it to go at this pace, all of those things are going to have an effect on the length of it. But here's the principle I want you to kind of digest with this. Only remain on Relationship Island as long as necessary. Because it was never designed to be a long-term destination. It is a temporary stop along the way. It's a temporary stop along the way. The world says that you should, before you ever get married, you should date that person for X number of years, and then you should probably live with that person for X number of years, and then you get engaged, and then maybe at some point down the road you actually get married. All right, this is the world. This is the model that they put forward. No, that only works when purity is not a consideration. Because honestly, you can only go around this little island so many times before you've explored about everything that there is to explore there. And pretty soon you're going to be looking for more to explore that should only be discovered in marriage. So long dating relationships are a recipe for temptation and frustration. Temptation and frustration. Here's how long it should last. Long enough to determine whether or not you want to marry this person. When you have evaluated them and you have learned about them and you know what there is to know about them, do you want to marry them or not? That's what Relationship Island is about. It's the interview. You're trying to determine something important here, and once you've communicated and you have observed and you know with confidence who they are, it's time for the next step. What's the next step? Well, that depends too, doesn't it? right? And we're gonna talk about that more next time. But if you know, I mean, you're in the relationship, it's like you both know, and it's almost like with our relationship, it's just like it got to this point after just a few months where we just knew and we assumed we're getting married. You know, we didn't have to have huge talks about it. I didn't have to propose to her ahead of time. We started talking about our life together, and it started to go that direction to where, yeah, this is just assumed. We're getting married. Okay, if you're at that point, it's probably time to start thinking about getting engaged. Okay, start moving that forward. Have those conversations, start moving in that direction. If you come to the conclusion, though, that you don't want to marry this person as they are right now, then it's probably time to end the relationship. All right? I thought you said this is going to be positive today. But yeah, it is. It is positive. Because there's nothing worse than being trapped in some undefined, indefinite thing forever without moving forward with your life. So make a decision. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, I said it depends how long. I think you need to be talking about a matter of months, not years. All right? I would say we knew, and we had a pretty slow implementation put upon us. We were busy, we had school, we had lots of boundaries. We knew within about 4 or 5 months. That was that point where it was like just assumed we're going forward with life, okay? You can probably know in 4 to 8 months, I would say, is safe. But with the caveat, it depends. Okay? So, engagement, we don't have that in our notes, but how long should engagement last? As long as it takes to pull the event together. The evaluation is done. You've already decided you're going to marry this person. So how long is it going to take you to pull together all the details and get invitations out and all of that? That's about how long the engagement should be, in my opinion. I think this is a cohesive map. And people that want to kind of hybridize it and do this to it and this to it, it's not going to work together in sequence, all right? But as I'm presenting it to you, this flows, this works in a scriptural and a wise way. Okay, lots of but, what if, what about, what if? And I'll give you a couple of these. What if we're still too young to get married? You're talking about a short relationship here. What's the answer? You should know this answer by now. You're in a relationship, but you're too young to get married. You shouldn't be in the relationship. It's time to break it off, go back to Friendship Cove until you're both at more of a stage ready for marriage. What if we're not financially prepared for marriage? I think that deserves a follow-up question, because what does financially prepared mean to you? If that means you've got to have 50 grand sitting in the bank, I don't think you're right there. If it means you need to have a job and be able to provide for yourself, then yes, definitely. If the person that you're dating is living at home because they are entirely financially dependent upon their parents, you shouldn't have gotten in the relationship, really, because that's pretty easy to observe they're not ready for marriage. Okay? But if you're working and you're committed to working and making it happen, and you're living on your own already, you can make it work. Okay? You can probably make it work. But, I want to see specific changes and growth before we get married. Okay? I said before, it's important to evaluate whether they have a trend of growth. Are they growing now? Yes or no? If they're not growing, big red flag. If they're not faithful, big red flag. You might want to think about getting out of that. But you can, here's the thing, you can only evaluate who they are now, not who they're going to be. Would you marry this person as they are right now? Would they make a good spouse the way that that person is right now? with the assumption that they have a desire to grow, as you do. Never assume that someone will change. Never assume someone will change. And then I think I put this statement in your notes. If not, you should write it down somewhere. The purpose of dating is not to develop that person into something more. It's to find out who they are. This is not the time to develop the person you want to marry. No, it's to discover, is this the person I want to marry? Okay. Now, remember, nobody's the whole package. Nobody's going to check all the boxes. They don't have to be a spiritual giant, but they need to be faithful, and they need to be growing. And it's unfair and it's unwise to drag out a relationship indefinitely, hoping that a person will change. I know you're putting those away. I'm not done. But how do I know if he or she is God's will for me to marry? This is a tough question, right? Whenever we get into matters of God's will, and it's kind of this assumption that somewhere out there is the ideal man, the ideal woman, and I just have to, if I can find that ideal one, then everything's just going to be perfect the rest of my life. That's not really how the Bible presents finding God's will for your life. Okay? Now it's important to search for God's will, but the way we do that is to follow the way of wisdom. Follow wisdom. Between what you come to know about the person in the dating relationship and what your parents and counselors and the crew, what everybody's observing, do they seem like a good fit for you? Do they seem like a good fit? Put a scenario to you. If you want to be together with this person the rest of your life, that's a big deal. If you have the blessing of counselors and authorities upon the relationship, if you genuinely like the person, you've gotten to know more about them, and the more you get to know them, the more you like them. And if the feeling is mutual, I'm telling you what, that's a rare combination. The odds that you're going to find that combination in more than one person is pretty much zero. So you start seeing those things coming together in wisdom, guess what? That's probably the person. That's probably God's will for you to marry. If God gives you peace about this, they're probably the one. Now, it's important decision. So I don't want you to make it flippantly or lightly, but don't overcomplicate it either. Okay? So, one last thought before we go. I have a section called this. What does the Bible say? Meaning this. We didn't turn to very many scriptures this morning, did we? You know why that is? Dating ain't in the Bible. It's a cultural, what we're talking about is a cultural adaptation. And it's something that we're trying to say, okay, can we take Bible principles and adapt them into kind of the way people find each other in our culture today? And I think we can, and that's fine. But listen, there's a lot in the Bible about how to be a good friend. And there's a lot in the Bible about how to be a good spouse. But there's not a lot in the Bible about dating, because it wasn't there. In fact, the evaluation back in Bible times was done by the parents. Mm-hmm. All right? They would do the evaluating. And then they would say, okay, this is a good person for you. You're going to get married to them. Now, that would be a little different in our American culture. And I think we need to make allowance for that, because we live in a different day and time than they did. But with that in mind, keep your parents involved. Right. This is the Bible way. Don't stay too long. This is not, Relationship Island wasn't built by God the way that I'm describing it. It was built by a culture, okay? That means keep it temporary, because it's not going to sustain you. It's not a sustainable place to remain. So that being said, a Christian dating relationship can be an effective and enjoyable way to get to know whether this person is somebody that you ought to marry. So do it right, and let the relationship grow within the bounds of purity, And guess what? You get to go on to the next step of your life with no regrets.
That's right.
Either way that it goes. You get to leave Relationship Island with no regrets. That's the goal. All right? Hope that's a help to you. That's about all the time we've got for this morning. Why don't we pray? Heavenly Father, thank you.